All right, it is 6:02, and I'm calling this meeting of the Environmental and Natural Resources Commission to order. First up is roll call. Commissioner Cryer?
Here.
Commissioner Bryan?
Here.
Commissioner Lates, myself is present. Commissioner Gill?
Here.
And Commissioner Saunders-Pierce?
Here.
And Commissioner Redmond is absent. Approval of today's agenda. Are there any changes for the agenda today?
No changes from staff.
Thank you, staff. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as written.
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Bryan. All those in favor?
Aye.
On to approval of the minutes from our last meeting, October 8th, 2025. Any comments or changes to those?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Gill.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Saunders-Pierce. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we are on to the next item on the agenda, which is the new business regarding the Church of Pentecost, 1701 Gervais Avenue East, with the wetland buffer variance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. So tonight we're going to hear a wetland buffer variance request from Church of Pentecost. This church is located at 1701 Jarvis Avenue. It's on the corner of Jarvis and Flandreau next to the Four Seasons Park. The current church is 3,125.6 square feet, and they have a parking area with 38 parking stalls. The comprehensive plan guides this property as institutional, and within that land use, other types of uses include schools, fire stations, libraries, religious institutions, cemeteries, and other city, county, and state properties. The zoning district in this area is R1, single dwelling residential, which is consistent with the surrounding properties in that area, which are mainly single family on the north side of Jarvis and then light manufacturing on the south side of Jarvis. But churches are allowed in any zoning district with a conditional use permit. The city wetland map does include a Manage A wetland that's located on the northeast corner of the property. However, the applicants did receive a wetland delineation on this wetland, and they brought it to the Ramsey, Washington Metro Watershed District, who approved the delineation. Excuse me, I see there's a typo in there, apologize. They approved the delineation and also downgraded that wetland from a Manage A to a Manage B, as it was originally assessed during the Minnesota routine assessment method back in 2019 when the Watershed District reviewed all of their wetlands, but they didn't do this real detailed analysis of the wetlands. So upon this review, it was downgraded to this Manage B. So we'll have to change our wetland maps to reflect that. But the city code does require a 75-foot wetland buffer be maintained around a Manage B wetland. So here we have the existing site layout and then the proposed site layout. So they are proposing a 3,668 square foot addition, and that addition will be located on the south side of the existing building. The occupancy of the new building is 270 people, which is how city code references parking requirements for churches. So with the 270 capacity, they are required to have 68 parking stalls. So they are adding 30 stalls for a total of 68. So they'll meet city code for the parking requirements. And then in the new design, they will add a new access on Flandreau Street. So that's the street that goes into the residential neighborhood there, and then maintain and make some improvements to that access along Jarvis Avenue. So here are some some images of the proposed addition. You can see that the existing building is a one-story masonry brick building with a pitched roof, and the new addition will be a one-story cement panel addition with a flat roof. Now let's dig into the wetland buffer requirements. So the Managed B wetland does require a 75-foot wetland buffer, and here you can see the delineated edge of the wetland and that 75 feet. The parking lot, infiltration basin, stormwater pipe, and site grading will encroach up to the wetland buffer. As you can see, mainly that stormwater pipe goes right into the edge of the wetland. So because of that encroachment all the way up there, we do call out this as a 75-foot wetland buffer variance. I wanted to note that there are quite a few significant trees out there. There's 52, and the city ordinance does define a significant tree as a hardwood that's 6 inches or larger, a softwood that is 12 inches or larger, and a conifer that's 8 inches or larger. So they had a tree plan conducted, a tree survey, determined there were 52 significant trees out there. They will be removing 32 of those trees. Unfortunately, there's some really large oak trees that they'll be removing with this proposal. But they will be adding 50 new trees, but according to our city code for tree replacement, they would need an additional 151.5 caliper inches of trees to be added to that site, which seems to be impossible. So our ordinance does allow a developer to pay into the city's tree fund at a rate of $60 per caliper inch that they cannot plant on site. So with that, the developer or the applicant would be required to pay $9,090 into the city's tree fund. And that tree fund is used to help manage trees on public property within our parks and our right-of-ways and so forth. The applicants took a look at what they could do to mitigate the impacts that are happening with the parking lot infiltration basin and grading work out there. And they will be adding native seed to the area of the buffer in yellow there that is not disturbed. So that area will not be graded, but invasive species will be removed in that area, and then native seed will be added. They are doing all native trees on the site, and the ones that are within the buffer are identified in the green there. And then they're also adding some native plugs in some key areas to capture the stormwater runoff and to ensure that those establish earlier, than the seed itself. So they'll be doing the plugs on one side of the wetland buffer, and then also within that within the edge of the infiltration basin there. They're also doing plugs in other areas of the lot, including the other two infiltration basins. There'll be a mixture of native seed and plug. And then again, they will be removing all buckthorn and other invasive species within that wetland buffer area. And then per city requirements, we would have them install the wetland buffer signs along the delineated edge to ensure that there's no grading, building, or mowing in the future. So that's maintained as natural area. And then they do point out, the stormwater management improvements that are going on here with all the new stormwater basins that are being installed, capturing the runoff from the parking and building, prior to it releasing into the wetland. And they'll likely point out that currently it may just, sheet down into that wetland. So some other things to consider. In the plans, it did call out invasive species just in the buffer area, I believe. But I would recommend that any kind of buckthorn or other invasive species, particularly on the east side of the building there, be removed because that's a really hilly and heavily treed area where there's likely some buckthorn under there. So that's another condition that you can look at adding. And now this is something that we did look at, and I'm sure they'll speak to. And again, I see one of my, I don't think it's a typo. I think I just added the photo over that, but it's reduced on-site park. No, okay, parking. Okay. Anyone else have a day? Reduced. Reduced on-site parking with proof of parking or shared parking. So proof of parking would be to identify areas of the lot that could be established as parking in the future, but that would require what we call a parking waiver, which would have to be approved by the city council. And of course, the concern is there that you don't have all this overflow parking spilling out onto the residential street and maybe parking in the Four Seasons parking lot or something like that. Or the possibility of shared parking. It does look like across the street there are quite a few parking spaces which are likely vacant on Sundays in that commercial complex there. So there's a possibility that they could share the parking, but then there's always the concern of the patrons having to cross the street, you know, and safety issues there. And then looking at underground stormwater management strategies, which reduce the required, all the grading that's going on site, particularly that larger infiltration basin that's being constructed near the wetland. But I'm sure they'll point out that there are some financial constraints with something like that. So that's something that you could look at for additional mitigation strategies in this regard. And the applicants did show some proof of parking that they would be willing to consider. However, this shows 6 parking spaces, and with that, I think the development would still require a wetland buffer variance and would really only save 3 ash trees, which, you know, those will likely be lost to emerald ash borer eventually anyway, and then 3 smaller oak trees. So I'm not sure you're gaining too much with the proof of parking on that side of the development. The larger trees are on the east side of the development. So with a variance, the city is required to consider 3 items. The reasonableness of this variance when the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the zoning ordinance, which the use of this has been a church and it will continue to be a church, so it is a reasonable request. The uniqueness when the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner. And in this case, you know, it is quite a narrow lot with a wetland on the corner of the lot. And then essential character, when the variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. And again, it is a church and will continue to be a church. And the applicant did point out in their wetland buffer variance justification, again, that it is a narrow lot. There's the existing wetland. And then they also point out the addition of stormwater management on that site, which would improve possibly the water quality of the wetland. So this did go before our Community Design Review Board for the architect, lighting, landscaping, and they did approve of that on October 21st. And then the same night, the Planning Commission reviewed it for the conditional use permit. They also looked at the parking lot setback variance, which was required, and then the wetland buffer variance. They also are required to make a recommendation on that, and they recommended approval of all 3 of those land use permits. And then the Environmental Commission tonight, of course, we're looking at the mitigation strategies to determine if the impacts to the wetland buffer are mitigated with the strategies that they're proposing, and then also making a recommendation on that actual wetland buffer variance. And then this will go before the City Council on November 24th. So with that, I do see there are several members of the applicant's team here that would be happy to speak, but I could start by answering any questions that the commission might have. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. Any initial questions for staff this time? Say with that, I'd like to invite the applicants up if you have anything to share before we open it up for discussion.
My name is Robert Binder. I'm a landscape architect with Civil Site. We did the work on that. I have with me the civil engineer that also worked on it, and the architect, and also the owner. So I think we're all available for questions. We appreciate everything the staff has done. She's worked really well with us, and we've been happy with the process so far. That's it.
Thank you.
If I may, I have a question. Thank you for being here tonight to answer questions. With respect to the infiltration basin that is closest to the wetland, what characteristics does that infiltration basin have in terms of landscaping? Like how suitable or how does it complement the buffer itself? Is my first question. And then what other placement had you thought about versus where it's currently proposed?
I think placement-wise, that's pretty much the spot we could put it without taking more trees, because we could have moved it a little farther west, plan north. We could have moved it up in that area a little bit, but we would end up having to take out more trees, existing trees, which we obviously didn't want to do. For plantings, what we do on a lot of these infiltration basins is we use a basic native seed mix, usually kind of starting with a MnDOT mix. They're tried and true and tested. And so that's what we have specified here. In addition, we were asked to look at putting some plugs in, live plugs. Now, those are obviously a lot more expensive, so we kind of want to reduce the numbers, but we know they work. It's a great way to stop or to establish those plants where there's going to be extra erosion. And so we've added some strips of those in some areas where we think they're going to be the most effective. The other thing that we're doing in the rest of that buffer as you go down closer to the actual wetland boundary is since we're taking out the buckthorn and the other invasives, and then going ahead and planting it again with seed. There'll probably be a little bit of a seed bank there in the soil anyway, but it's not going to really be probably enough nor able to sort of fight its way back through the invasives, which will probably try and come back. So, does that answer your questions?
Yeah, thank you. Yep.
I have a question. Staff, I think you can help me out with this one. For the natives that are being proposed on site native vegetation, is there going to be an operation and maintenance plan similar to the wetland variants that we saw last month with the Century development? Looking at, I believe the HOA has the long-term responsibility and maintenance of that, and we had that finalized in some sort of contractual obligation.
Correct. I'm sorry I didn't point that out, but that's part of the environmental review, and it does include this 3-year wetland buffer maintenance plan, and also would include ensuring that the invasives are removed and managed over a 3-year period. And the city would take in an escrow of 150% of that work, of the planting and then maintenance, and we would maintain that until it's established. So that is for a 3-year period. But then, of course, it is a conditional use permit, so let's say 10 years down the road, there appears to be some issues with the plantings, invasives are taking over. The city could always address it through the conditional use permit and make sure, that's corrected.
Thank you. And then just a clarification, the 3-year establishment escrow, would that cover just the vegetation in the buffer or the other basins outside of the buffer as well that would, I presume, have native vegetation in them?
Good question. So we also take a letter of credit to ensure all the exterior improvements are complete. And that could include a tree escrow. So there's certain escrows that are released at certain times. So if all the trees are planted with a 1-year warranty, they would receive that tree escrow back. If the landscaping was established after a year, the letter of credit could be released or reduced. You know, so that's kind of a separate escrow that we would require for the overall site.
Gotcha.
But we carry this 3-year management escrow for the buffer.
Okay, thank you.
Could you comment maybe on the extent of, your knowledge to the extent of the invasives that are outside of the buffer zone, and what the extent of the additional work would be to include those in the management plan for invasive removal?
Well, I mean, we walked down, but I'm not sure what else is on site. You know, normally, I'm sure there's some buckthorn. I don't know if anyone else knows what else is on site invasives wise. Yeah, I guess we do, I guess we don't really know. Doing more obviously would be better, but again, we run into some budget concerns. So that would be our concern, really. Not that we don't want to remove it, it's just that it costs money. So.
So if I may have another question. So one of the concepts that was in staff's presentation was using proof of parking in the, I guess, northernmost area of the parking site plan. And a lot of that sits directly in the buffer zone for that footprint. So if that proof of parking were part of the development plan and that area was no longer dedicated or needed for parking, what would you anticipate the landscaping or the kind of the pervious surface to be there if that concept were to be implemented?
If we went that way, if we thought that, well, the owners obviously wants to be fully parked out so they can have everyone there. They want to obviously have their parking on site because everyone likes to control their own destiny, their own parking. So that's why we're sitting with where we are now. We know if we did some proof of parking, we would eliminate some of the trees that we have to remove, which would really help us for the fee, and maybe something that we need to consider. But then we would dip under what the planning wants to see for parking on site. So if all that happened, though, and we decided it made sense to take some of those parking spaces out, we would keep those trees there, so we would keep that existing soil. You know, whatever's there, we would probably go through it. If we needed to reseed or we needed to do something there, there's woodland mixes and some other nice mixes that we could do. We would start with seeding at least. I think at one point we also have some screening along that north property line that's at the edge of the parking. We'd have to see at that point, maybe we wouldn't need that screening. That affects our, you know, our tree numbers, and how does that balance with what we're removing? So it's a little bit of a moving equation as we go, but that's what we would, I mean, that would be what we'd propose at least.
Thank you. And do you happen to remember the square footage, or perhaps staff, if you have that figure that was in the presentation? Do you remember what the square footage was of the impervious area that would be subject to that proof of parking? I can't, I mean, it's a ballpark, like, you know.
Was it? The engineer's going to do some math.
Well, at least he didn't pull out a napkin. That's good.
About, what, 2,000? 1,500? Parking spaces are like 9.5 by 18.
Okay, 1,200, 1,250 roughly. Okay, yeah.
For the six.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question on, here, the applicant's concerns of controlling your parking destiny, which I totally understand. Wondering for staff, is there examples of shared parking agreements throughout the city, and how has that worked in the past, if so?
I haven't worked in the planning realm
I
for a
suppose.
while, but, you know, we've worked on, this is a bad example, but we had a nightclub by the mall, and it used to be a shoe store, and then it turned into a nightclub. And so they needed proof of parking, and of course, they were surrounded by a sea of parking by the Maplewood Mall, so it was never an issue. So they had shared parking. They were required to get shared parking agreements to meet the parking requirements. And then proof of parking, it's been a while there also, but we do have several examples of that. But the issue, of course, is in the future, if it's determined that, you know, they're having issues with parking, the city could require that they build it. So it might be cheaper to build it now, and, you know, those are some issues to consider.
So have there been any conversations on shared parking with any of the other commercial properties, or is that kind of out of scope of what you've been considering with this plan?
It hasn't been part of what we discussed. I don't know if the owner has had any discussions. Again, I'm not sure how far they pursued it because they want to stay within their site there. Do you know something about it?
Yeah, I think we had this in the planning commission meeting. We'd responded to that. It was just concerns with safety because there's no crosswalk.
Yeah.
Could there be a ped crossing installed without it being fiscally
It'd be a
impactful?
bit of a scope increase for
Yeah,
this project.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason you couldn't paint something on the pavement, but I'm sure there's a stack of paper that needs to be filled out to get that done across that road, I'm guessing. But
Well, if I may ask one more question. So with respect to that particular area in the parking lot on the north, you know, it's about 1,200 to 1,250 square feet. It's currently got trees. If that were to be not developed and remain in its current condition, it'd be 6 to 8 stalls, is that right? And how many, like percentage-wise, would that be of the overall parking on the site? About 9%. Okay. And then the existing trees that are there, do you happen to recall how mature they are, what species they are?
I think you'd said they were mostly ash or a few ash, which weren't really high valued anyway, but they still count in your formula for the city. So, you know, that's the part we were kind of hanging our hat on, is that we could save a little there, although they're probably not the most desirable on site anyway. Yeah. There might be an
Mr.
oak
Chair,
there.
there's 3 ash and 3 oaks.
Thank you.
And they're all fairly small oaks, I think, between 8 and 12 inches.
The largest tree is a 32-inch oak tree, and that's located on the east side of the church, where the parking is expanded over there, and they're building an infiltration basin there. So that's, while that wouldn't reduce wetland buffer variance, it would save more trees. So curious, perhaps the applicant can address why proof of parking was shown on the north side, not the east.
I think we showed it that way on this concept just because it takes some out of the wetland buffer area. which seemed like an important priority. But you're right, we probably get, if you do the numbers, we probably get more benefit from taking them off the plan north side, the west side.
Yeah.
We probably,
Oh,
yeah.
west, I
we
kept
probably
saying
do.
east, I apologize.
And it may be something that we still look a little harder at from the standpoint that the owner probably doesn't want to pay for more into the fund. So maybe there's some give and take there. It doesn't really help the wetland issue, but it may help the numbers.
So we have the map up here just for reference. And yeah, I kept saying east, I apologize, west side of the church
Yeah.
towards the park. So if you remove 6 there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you know, because there's not parking on both sides.
Mhm.
I don't know, it just seemed like you get more for your money by reducing the parking there than on the north side.
Yeah.
But then again, that doesn't help with the variance for the wetland. And Mr. Chair, I should point out that they are building, well, the existing parking lot is built up to the edge of the right-of-way. And the new parking, this is something that the Planning Commission reviewed. The new parking is 5 feet from the right-of-way where it would be required to be 15, so that's a variance requirement there. And because of the location of the parking area and the requirement to add trees, the applicants in their landscape plan do call out trees, I think there were 10 of them, within the actual right-of-way of Flandreau Street. And so we would want to see a long-term management plan for those trees as well, to ensure that, 10 years from now, if there was a tree that died, that it would be the church's responsibility to replace that.
So one other item I'd like to just bring forward for the applicant, one of the other concepts for a mitigation plan was to look at the invasive species removal on the entire lot. And for conversation purposes, I would focus that on buckthorn. I know you didn't do a full inventory perhaps, but I do see that that's one of the things that could be a possibility as a way to, mitigate for the variance. In my opinion, the underground stormwater management strategy would probably incur costs, significantly higher than, the benefit of getting that infiltration basin out of the buffer area. But the invasive species, as I look at the site plan in particular, that, again, if we were to use buckthorn as the primary species of interest for removal, there's a significant amount of oaks that are in that open space that's outside of the buffer, right? And those, the question that I have is it, with respect to the other buffer vegetation, if that open space area were to be removed, have invasive species removed, would there be an opportunity to introduce some, just not plugs, but introduce some new seeding to help that area become more of a vegetation community rather than just turf grass and no buckthorn? What would be your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, if you required that we go through the whole site and get rid of invasives, we would certainly have to put something back in. And I don't know if there's honeysuckle or other things that would have to be removed there, but yeah, we would have to put something back in for sure. Again, we'd start with some good, solid native seed, and go from there. Yeah, yeah. I think the nice thing about places, I don't want to say like a church, but like a property like this, it's going to be around for a long, long time, and it's going to be right here. And they're going to have continuous ideas and programs and looking for opportunities to improve their place. And so they actually kind of have an advantage where they're just eventually don't have to, they don't necessarily have to pay for everything as they go like a business would. So I think there's a good opportunity for a property like this to put that together themselves, and that may or may not be something they want to do, but yeah. But certainly, we've seen it happen before at a lot of churches. The Boy Scouts come in and they do all the buckthorn or something like that, yeah.
Great, thank you.
That's a great idea. But something to consider is there's really no lawn area, usable lawn area for the church. So they didn't really show a usable active area that they wanted to maintain. And I'm not sure if that's high priority here.
Well, I guess just for the commission here, Commissioner Saunders Pierce, I think, brings up a good point. The potential mitigation strategies that are proposed, removing the invasive species throughout the other portions of the lot and maintaining them are probably the most cost-effective option proposed, and I think it gets everyone what we're kind of after, maintaining vegetation and buffer, or increasing it in other areas where maintaining the desired amount of parking. So I don't know if we want to go down that path, but I'm leaning towards some sort of condition like that where we increase the buffer in other areas of the property with natives.
Yeah, I would agree with that recommendation. That's where I was thinking as well.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Gill, and, for the record, commissioners, I do feel very inclined, where feasible, to reduce or, eliminate impervious area and wetland buffers. But having had this discussion tonight, there's a host of practical limitations to that. And I think that there is higher ecological value in looking at habitat restoration in the adjacent part of the property that's adjacent to the wetland buffer. And again, like I've already stated, the underground stormwater management strategies, I think in this instance, is really just not going to bear value, because we'll still have the parking that's going to be within the buffer area. And I do think that with respect to eliminating 6 parking spaces, there'll be some trees that remain, but some of them are ash, some of them are smaller oak. And then there's the complexity of getting the approval for the proof of parking, where as a mitigation strategy, that invasive species removal seems to be a more ecologically impactful solution for this particular application, is my opinion.
Real quick question for staff. Can you refresh my memory on what the difference between a Class A and Class B wetland is?
Manage A wetland requires a 100-foot buffer.
And were those, okay, and so what makes something an A versus a B?
Oh, I see. I don't know all the science behind it, but A is the most pristine wetland,
Right.
and then B would be impacted in some degree over the years, and a C, even more so.
Right, okay. So the type of wetland that we're dealing with here is already one that's been classified as having impacts over time. I'm in agreement with Commissioner Saunders Pierce that asking for more natives and whatnot to be added, it's just an undue financial burden that doesn't make sense, especially if this is something that's been disturbed for a while. So I just think that's an undue burden.
Mr. Chair, we could also, you talked about expanding the buffer itself. So currently, let's see, I don't have the buffer up there. Here. So you can see the 75-foot buffer, but to kind of expand that and have an area that they can't mow or grade or build on in the future, it could be expanded onto the west side of the building. But, I would be concerned that they just have some lawn area, for active use. But that's a possibility, and then we could require those signs to be installed in those areas as well. Perhaps, Mr. Chair, we could ask, what is the proposal for some active lawn area, if any? It's all parking right now.
Well,
Yes,
the site is quite hilly, actually. I think that area to the west of the existing church, it kind of goes up and down quite a bit. I know, for instance, the reason that we didn't expand that parking to the west, the reason that doesn't, continue up further is because we're running into grade issues. But yeah, I don't know if there's an active lawn.
Yeah. I don't think we know the full program of what the owner wants to do exactly. I mean, they may not even know what it is at this point. They've taken up a lot of their space they have now with both of these things. They're kind of filling up most of their space. I would assume they'll probably want some sort of lawn area as a gathering spot or a play area. A lot of churches will also put out a little patio or something for an evening event of some kind or a daytime or weekend event of some kind. I guess I would speculate that, but I doubt they even have it programmed yet for what the rest of their site will be. If we had to do a little more native planting, kind of up and around the larger infiltration basin, that probably is some area they can't use anyway for other stuff. That might be reasonable. But again, we'd probably lean on just doing some seed or that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Only flat area.
Mr. Chair, to help guide, so if you wanted to expand the buffer, we'd really need to know where, where that would end. So perhaps the applicants could describe or, come back or before the city council, at least show an area that, is there a door on that side, on the west side? Okay.
Yes. Kind of in the middle of the existing building, right in the middle on the west.
Oh,
There's a
okay.
door right there. Yeah. And that's kind of the only flat area is like within 10, 15 feet of that door. And then kind of the rest of the undisturbed area is just kind of a hill. It just goes up and down, undulates, fairly steep grades.
Oops. Well.
That's right.
Of course, they do have access to the park, right?
So I just want to confirm what we're maybe honing in on. What, expanding the buffer but not restoring?
Restoring as well, but, putting those signs in a place that shows that it's an expanded buffer rather than that 75 feet.
Okay.
But ensuring that we're placing it so that they can use this lawn area for future, activities.
Mhm.
So that's just kind of the question now is, what is that area?
I think it's something that could be considered. I think, yeah, a lot of it kind of depends on intentions of the property owners and, yeah, so it'd be kind of like in that area.
Doesn't look like they use the existing lawn area currently. Well, I guess we can't really tell here. But at any rate, perhaps it's a condition where you're recommending expansion of the buffer area to areas around, their active use, whatever that might be, and we'll get that detail before the council meeting. And then the requirement to add the wetland buffer signs at the established buffer line, which would be just beyond that active use area.
Good evening. Thank you for your time and the discussion and everything. We really appreciate the staff. And so my name is Joseph Opon. I'm one of the leaders in the church and been helping going through this process. And so certainly appreciate all of the considerations relative to managing kind of what is really helpful from a nature perspective and also what helps us from a cost. I mean, we want to be judicious with kind of the money that hardworking people bring to the church, and so that's why we're really trying to find the kind of appropriate balance, and so I appreciate that. I guess maybe I do like the suggestion that Commissioner Sanders, you were kind of bringing in terms of, okay, what is kind of practical and what brings additional value, and I do think that probably some of the batons and kind of looking at that holistically might be helpful. I guess just trying to compare that with kind of the extension of the buffer, right? Because I do think that as the team has articulated, there isn't a lot of natural places that we're able to naturally do that, right? And so the thought is that if there's an event, I mean, we have the parking lot, and so you can set up chairs, you can set up tents, and use that. As much as possible, I think we'll try and kind of get some greenery in front of the church, especially where the old building is. There's a little bit of space that you can see as it connects to the new, right? And so those are places that we can use. And so that is just kind of the perspective I wanted to add. Certainly, I mean, I think as much as possible, maybe I don't know kind of the benefit of expanding the buffer zone, right? It's essentially my main consideration, but I think that is something that we, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for those remarks. I appreciate that input. And for the commissioners, I do, I'm sensitive about expanding the buffer because that's, that's an encumbrance on the property. It's a permanent encumbrance on the property versus what I had, wanted to explore as a mitigation strategy, which is, buckthorn and whether it's honeysuckle, removing things that are not ecologically valuable within the upland, so outside of the wetland buffer, but not shifting the buffer itself, which again is an encumbrance in perpetuity on the property. I would also, have us remember when we reviewed the development proposal for the police firing range, there was impervious surface within that buffer area, which I was not pleased about either. But we found ways to do additional restoration around the fringe of that wetland, which was a Manage A. So while I continue to not be, I'm not, seeing impervious area in wetland buffers is not my preferred alternative, but in this case, with the practicalities of the the proof of parking and so forth. You know, I would like to see more of the ecological restoration as a mitigation strategy. So, and not alter the wetland buffer extent. So in that way, you know, we were able to add value ecologically, you know, make sure that the variance has a robust mitigation plan, but is not unduly burdensome in the sense of having to, you know, navigate through the proof of parking process and so forth. So I would like to introduce a motion that the commission approve the wetland variance application with the condition that the invasive species that are within the upland outside of the wetland buffer be removed, and that the planting, that the area be seeded with a suitable upland mix that would complement, you know, the native habitat. And so with the invasive species removal, I would say buckthorn, you know, would be the primary objective, not limited to buckthorn, but buckthorn would be the primary objective, and other easily removable invasive species.
Before we move forward with that motion, I just want to clarify. So not within the buffer, would there be ecological restoration within the buffer too, or just the upland?
Thank you for that clarification. And so so in my head, I would assume that within the buffer that, you know, there is going to have to be restoration because there is going to be some earthwork. And so any existing buckthorn within the buffer area as well. So not just in the upland, but to make that buffer as robust as possible. So thank you for that clarification.
So the motion being to kind of expand that invasive species control and seeding to that uphill area outside of the buffer, in addition to the proposed mitigation within the buffer zone.
Yes, correct.
Okay. That is motion made by Commissioner Saunders Pierce, and I will second that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So the motion is approved. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. So this will go to the city council on, now I lost the date, November 24th. Thanks for your work, and good luck.
And next on the agenda here, we have no unfinished business listed or additional visitor presentations. Any commissioner presentations? And then on to staff presentations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to update you on the October 27th City Council meeting, where the council heard 3 items that came before the Environmental Commission here. Well, actually, one didn't, but you'll be interested in this. First was the resolution of appreciation for Nancy Edwards, and it kind of came up to us real quick. And as you know, Nancy did serve on the commission for 2.5 years, not the full 3 years. So we just kind of added it, and I apologize, we didn't have time to invite our chair or anyone, but the council did approve that resolution of appreciation, so we'll go ahead and send that to Nancy, and thank her for her work on the commission for the 2.5 years that she did serve. And the city council also reviewed a proposal to install solar on the Wakefield Park Community Building. So this building was constructed in 2020 by the city, and it was solar ready. It has a south-facing, slightly sloped roof, so it's ready to install solar. And it was in the capital improvement plan to do that this year. So we had funding However, they opened up a third round of the solar on public buildings opportunity, and we are applying for that. And if we are awarded, it would pay for all but about $7,000 of the unit. So we'll learn by maybe end of year if we are eligible for that grant. Regardless if we are or aren't, we do have a contractor in place, and that work would begin in the spring. It'll offset 95% of the energy use out there. And then Century Ponds, we heard, of course, all the wetland buffer variances required out there, and it did go to the city council, and that development has been approved, and with all the mitigation strategies as you propose, so those are all standing. So now the real work really begins, is implementing that. They will have to come back to the council for final plat approval and probably some other items, but we'll continue to monitor that. That'll be a really big project for the city. So thank you for your work on that. That was a challenging review. Next, I wanted to let you know that you may recall our assistant city manager, HR director came before you, Mike Darrow, and was going to all the boards and commissions and asking for your opinion on how it was to serve on the commissions, if you needed any more resources, things like that. Well, one of the things that he heard at all the commissions is it sure would be nice to be appreciated. We used to have an board commission appreciation events in the past, and that just kind of fell away. I think after COVID probably is what happened. But we're bringing that back. So they have set a date, February 5th. So mark that on your calendar, and hopefully, I don't know, that's all I know. But I'm sure it'll be fun. And then the Environmental and Natural Resources Commission calendar. So I don't have a slide for that, but I'm considering canceling the December meeting and bringing us back in January. And then in January, we would vote for our chair and vice chair, and we could hold a, we don't call it goal setting anymore. We could hold our session on setting our priorities. And then, exciting news here, we will then review the climate mitigation plan, the action items and goals, so that'll come before us in February. So that was, did kind of take a different turn from our original plan. We had our climate mitigation plan team in place, and they were reviewing and making recommendations on the goals and action items. And so that was all in place, these draft goals. And so we brought that to the executive leadership team, and they really wanted an opportunity to kind of make it Maplewood specific. So some of it has been slightly modified, but just to make it more specific to Maplewood and really get that buy-in from the executive team who weren't on that climate mitigation plan team. So we've been doing that for a couple months now, and now we have that complete, and our consultants will have a draft plan by January.
Will that go back to the plan team?
Yes, so we're planning to bring that back to the climate mitigation plan team in January also. So we did have 2 members on our commission here that served on that team, so thank you for your work on that, and sorry it's been stalled for a bit, but we're back on track. So we'll bring that to the Environmental Commission in February. So those are 2 months that we know what's on our calendar. But I really don't have any items for December, and I don't want to hold a meeting just to hold a meeting unless anyone has something.
I was just curious if there had been any updates on the schedule for reviewing the green building code, because I know that was still an outstanding item.
Yes. So that's something, a discussion item that came from our climate mitigation plan review. And we can discuss this further when we get into the climate mitigation plan. But our building official and others discussed the fact that the state will be adopting the new energy code next year. And much of that will kind of change how we're reviewing permits anyway. So they are recommending that we hold off on finalizing the green building code until that energy ordinance is adopted, and then bringing it back up. So I'll get more detail on that and share that with you. But, so that we'd pick that up again next year sometime.
Very good.
Was there potentially a staff presentation that was going to happen towards the end of the year here? I think maybe John was looking at like some stormwater stuff.
That would be great. You know, we did bring that up in our environmental priorities,
Okay.
but I probably dropped the ball. Did you talk to John and he sounded interested?
did not,
Because I'm
no.
calling him tomorrow. Yeah, we did talk about looking into kind of seeing how the city handles stormwater management, and then scheduling that tour for the capital regions to see how they do. Of course, we have 3 watershed districts here in Maplewood, and Capital Region being one of them. So we took the tour, we got that piece out of the way, but that's a good point. We never did touch on that. I think they got really busy with the road construction season, but I'm going to bring that up. I'm going to say Commissioner Gill is really wondering what's going on with that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the update, staff, and appreciate the city council updates as well on those reports. And that brings us to the end of the meeting. I will move to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Gill. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Meeting is adjourned at 7:04.